We might be a small island, but we've got a big history. Everywhere you stand, there are worlds beneath your feet. And so every year, hundreds of archaeologists across Britain go looking for more clues. Who lived here, when, and how?
You can even see the architecture of the bone inside the jaw there.
Archaeology is a complex jigsaw puzzle, drawing together everything from skeletons to swords, temples to treasure.
She's got a very cartoon-like face, hasn't she?
From Orkney to Devon, we're joining this year's quest on sea, land and air. We'll share all of the questions and find some of the answers as we join the teams in the field, digging for Britain. From Roman times, the mystery of a man buried face down on a bed of meat. A fabulous treasure trove of coins dedicated to ancient gods. And the shocking evidence of 97 murdered babies buried beneath this field. I'm heading towards a place close to Hadrian's Wall where archaeologists are finding signs of that Roman influence writ large. This narrow road with its passing places is known locally as the Stone Gate. It's one of hundreds of similar roads which crisscross this part of northern England. But what makes this one stand out is that it was once the northern frontier of the entire Roman Empire. And guarding the central section of the Stone Gate, that important east-west supply route, was the fort of Vindolanda. Each year, from April to mid-September, an army of over 500 archaeology volunteers comes here from all over the world. And every week they make new discoveries.
What you've got there, John, is a beautiful, great big dark blue glass melon bead. And there's a bit of a debate about those, because some people think that Roman soldiers just simply wore these as decorations, or ladies wore them as decorations. Right. It's a very, very corroded lump of metal. But what we've actually got here is the back of a helmet, by the looks of things. It's very, very badly bashed, but you sort of see it on the side profile. Oh, yeah. This is the neck guard at the back, and this is the start of the top of the helmet coming up.
Vindolanda has been excavated for over 40 years, but they estimate they've only uncovered 15% of it, and that it would take another 150 years to finish the job, which is utterly remarkable because the site as it stands is absolutely massive.
Vindolanda was bought in 1929 by the renowned archaeologist Professor Eric Burley. His grandson Andrew is now its director of excavations.
Site, but the Romans built 4 forts here by the time Hadrian's Wall was built. So
oh really? So the first ones predate the wall?
Predate the wall by a good 40 years, and they're a long way down. They're 7 or 8 metres beneath where we're standing.
And would they have been stone built?
No, the first 6 forts here are built in timber, and the last 3 are in stone. And so they knock them down, build them up, knock them down, build them up very, very quickly. So in perhaps only 125 years, you get the landscape really shooting up to the fort we're standing in at the moment.
So this is the last fort. There's an enormous amount of it still in place.
It's because 9 forts have been built right on top of each other here that so much archaeological evidence survives.
In just the last couple of weeks, the team working here have uncovered this wonderful flagstone street, which leads from the northern gate of the fort straight up to the headquarters building. And the stones are really worn with centuries of use, and you can just imagine the sound of those hobnailed boots as the Roman soldiers marched in and out of the fort.
As well as the excavations within the walls of the stone fort, this year a separate team is working in the Vicus, the civilian village which lies just outside the garrison here at Vindolanda.
So what are you excavating here?
Well, it's all part of the the garrison settlement that sprang up outside the last stone fort that was built at Vindolanda. So it's a combination of sort of workshops, shops and houses, sort of wagon parks and trading areas to supply and sort of, you know, link in with the fort there. So that it was a bit like retail world outside there. We had all sorts of shops flanking the roads. A little bit of evidence for a pub as well. We had a building on there where we found a room right on the street front there, and inside that room all the artefacts that we found were basically drinking beakers and game encounters. So
Fantastic.
yeah, it's one of those sites where you can almost be there as well. You can virtually hear the Romans when you're digging, because there's so many artefacts come from the ground and you've got all these buildings that are in really super condition.
For the past 3 weeks, Justin and his team have been working on a cobbled roadway which ran through the heart of the Roman village.
We've been really very lucky with this one because we actually got some super dating evidence, because trapped in among the cobbles we actually found a little silver denarius of Severus Alexander, which was minted in AD 222.
Right.
So of course, because it was trapped in the road surface, it means that the road surface can't really have been made before that coin was minted, so we've got a super date for it.
Just beside the Roman fort is the conservation area, where the daily finds are taken to Barbara Burley and her team. Are all of these artefacts coming out this year?
Most of them are, yes.
Oh, this is amazing.
Yes.
This little griffin.
Just pull it out and have a little bit closer look. You can see it's got the fabulous wings here, and you can actually just make out the detail of the feathers. And then he's got the hindquarters there of a lion. And the Romans had a lot of superstitious beliefs. They felt that this type of being would have been very good for protecting maybe something precious and things like gold or treasure. So we know that he's a little statue, but we don't know what he was possibly guarding.
The village of Hambledon near the Thames has always been a desirable place to live. Even so it seems for the Romans who built villas here. I'm just up from the river now and walking along on the edge of this beautiful field, which seems to be growing some kind of cereal crop. But it's not the crop I'm interested in at all. It's what's in the ground underneath it. Almost exactly 100 years ago, this woman, Miss Glassbrook, was walking along in this very same field and started to find some strange pieces of pottery, very much like these ones. And she decided they were worth further investigation. Miss Glassbrook approached a local archaeologist who in 1912 would make an extraordinary discovery beneath the soil in this Buckinghamshire field. The archaeologist Alfred Cox had discovered the foundations of a high-status Roman villa, which he would call Yewden. Over the course of a year, Cox would excavate and photograph the villa while collecting the finds. But in doing so, he would uncover a dark secret, which is still troubling archaeologists almost a century later.
The main villa house is what we see in this photograph, and there's a little bump in the middle of the field here, and the bump is entirely due to that building beneath the surface. But it's quite nice, you can work out where you are, and you know it's that bump because you can actually see the scene in front of you.
You've got that house there, which has got a white front on it, a right gable end.
That's right.
It's now pebble dashed, isn't it? But
Pebble
that's
dashed,
isn't it?
That's right.
This is a huge excavation.
It is massive. He had to have a huge team of labourers to dig this. It was all by hand, so all by shovel and wheelbarrows, and so that would have been a huge labour force and an enormous cost.
So this is all still there underneath that
Still
wheat?
there, just it's got all the backfill, then the soil layer reinstated, and of course crops on it forevermore.
For many years, the finds from Eudon Roman Villa were kept in a special museum at Hambledon. But when that closed in the 1950s, they were moved to Buckinghamshire County Museum in Aylesbury, where, appropriately enough, Alfred Cox was once curator. Cox published his results in 1921, but it's the way he reached his conclusions that's interesting archaeologists today. Alfred Cox was unlike most of the antiquarian archaeologists operating in the early 20th century, many of whom are, to be honest, just treasure hunters. But Cox was different. He paid careful attention to each and every find. He labelled them with the name, the location, and even the precise depth at which they were found. The artefacts from the 1912 excavation fill over 300 boxes. So, Brett, all of these boxes here are from Yewden, are they?
Absolutely.
Brett Thorne is Keeper of Archaeology at the Buckinghamshire County Museum.
But this is all of the objects he recovered from the 1912 excavations. And these, as you can see, these are Roman brooches.
But he's not just collecting the brooches, there are little pieces of just random bits of metal here as well.
Exactly. He didn't differentiate. He just picked up absolutely everything.
Not only did he collect even the tiniest little cruddy bit, like that little section there, he labelled everything, even these tiny pieces.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of show you an example, if I show you this one, this rather crude bit of card.
Is that Cox's writing?
This is Cox's handwriting, yeah. East side of yard, 35 inches north of east of enclosure wall, Yewden, and the date, 2/10/12. So this is his original display piece.
Fantastic. So this must be really unusual for the time.
Hugely unusual. I mean, these antiquarians just went in and dug. They just took out the goodies, the pretty items to put on show, and they weren't interested in anything else. All these little bits of bronze wire, little tiny sherds of pot where the label is actually bigger than the pot piece. They wouldn't have kept that. They'd have just dumped it all back on site, completely wrecked the stratigraphy. We wouldn't know anything about the site.
There's so much more information available to you now.
Yeah.
Because he's done this work, because he's been so careful, so meticulous.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah.
Over the past year, Jill has been taking home the Hambledon boxes to re-evaluate Cox's 1912 findings with the eye and the techniques of the 21st century archaeologist. But there was one particular set of remains which Alfred Cox was uncharacteristically reticent about.
Well, in Cox's report, he obviously tells us about a good number of the finds selectively. He doesn't discuss all the finds. And I was rather surprised to find in his report that in actual fact he did find 97 infant burials. Now, he only gives them a paragraph or so of a mention, which, you know, even in 1912, that's a very important find. It's an unusually high number. And it was rather odd the way he just described them rather informally as being wrapped as little bundles and potentially buried secretly after dark.
So a tiny little bag here of, little infant bones.
Absolutely minute, beautifully preserved though.
The bone is incredibly well preserved, and you've got some little pieces of skull there, which is, I mean, it's almost eggshell-like, isn't it? It's incredibly thin, but brilliantly preserved. The infant bones were thought to have been lost until last year, when Jill and Brett rediscovered them, packed away in old cigar and gun cartridge boxes. How many infants were there buried at Yewden?
Well, that was the key thing. We've got 97. I mean, it's an astounding number for the one villa.
It's quite a shocking number, actually.
It is,
Yeah.
And it's actually quite normal to have infant burials. You're not considered to be a proper human being ready for the cemetery until you're about 2 years old in the Roman world. So you do bury any babies that are lost between being born and 2 years, and you put them in the garden or in the yard or perhaps even under your floor.
But this number?
But not 97. There's something different about Yewden.
There's something very strange going on there, isn't there? So these are the boxes, are they, that the bones were kept in?
This is how Cox packed them. Cigarette boxes, all with his detailed notes on about where that particular infant was buried, and again the date and all of the information that he loved to record. But it's strange.
But what doesn't seem in keeping is the fact that he squirrels these away and doesn't really look at them again.
There's no mention anywhere in the published report of them other than a short paragraph saying Cox thought because the bodies kind of cut and recut each other, they're buried in a very small area, that he thought it must have been done surreptitiously after dark and hidden. I do handle human bones, obviously, but this is the first time I've really had to deal with infant bones, and it's quite a strange feeling, isn't it?
It actually quite upset me because they are obviously very small skeletons and they were clearly very young babies, so it just has that effect on you.
Nearly a century after Alfred Cox first discovered them, the infant bones are once again coming under scientific scrutiny, this time by Dr. Simon Mays.
It's quite common to find a handful of burials at Roman villa sites, but But what is unusual is to come across quite so many. There's no other site that's yielded anything like the 97 infant burials that we've got from Hambledon. Something that struck me as I laid out skeleton after skeleton was they all seemed to be a pretty similar size. The best way to determine how old an infant was when they died is to measure the bones. We measure the bones of the arms and legs. By doing this, we can age an infant to within about 2 weeks.
Simon's measurements confirmed his initial hunch. The babies looked the same size because they'd all died around the same age, of 40 weeks gestation.
So it seems what we're dealing with is infants that died around time of birth.
If this was natural infant mortality, there would be a wide range of bone size, but this wasn't the case.
And that made us think that perhaps these individuals were being deliberately killed.
The shocking evidence is suggesting infanticide. At Yewden Villa, the Romans were murdering their newborn children.
I think the fact that we've got 97 infants makes us look for something systematic that was going on.
In the coming months, Simon will carry out further tests on the bones of those babies once buried beneath this Buckinghamshire field. These investigations may shed light on the motives behind these awful killings.
It seems like there's something quite disturbing going on here, because to some extent we expect to see this. We know that infanticide was there in Roman society, but at this scale, what's happening?
The Roman army just happened to coincidentally be just over the hill. There's a track, in fact, leading off in that direction towards where we know there's a Roman road and, in fact, a Roman army encampment for some time. The only explanation you keep coming back to is it's got to have been a brothel.
Really?
It really is the only explanation. You can think of all sorts of wealth of other reasons, but they just don't hold water.
But at the moment, the story of Eudon Roman Villa hasn't been told in all its fullness, has it?
Absolutely not. And that is just my opinion. I have no proof of that theory, of course, but it's one that works for the moment. I'm going to continue investigating it.
100 miles away in Kent, there are new investigations into the beginnings of Roman rule, almost exactly where the Emperor Claudius invaded these shores.
In the year 43 AD, the people living here on the Kent coast looking out to sea would have been greeted by the sight of an armada of ships approaching. It was almost 100 years since Julius Caesar had first invaded these shores, and the Romans were back. This time, they were here to stay.
Just half a mile away from where the Roman army came ashore, we're getting a glimpse into the Britain of the 1st century. And it's all thanks to an £87 million road being built here in Kent. 6 miles long and covering 100 acres, it's the last part of a road project linking the Channel Tunnel and coastal ports to the motorway network beyond.
The new road here cuts right across a part of the country that is incredibly rich in archaeological terms, because for thousands of years this tip of Kent, jutting out into the English Channel, has been the gateway to Britain, not just for the Romans arriving in 43 AD, but for those who preceded them and those who would come much later. Archaeologically speaking, this place is something of a gold mine.
For the last few months, Digging for Britain has been following the teams from Oxford Wessex Archaeology. They've been tasked with excavating and recording the evidence uncovered by the diggers and bulldozers, before the ground is once again covered up, this time by a 4-lane highway. The entire length of the new road has been carefully stripped by earth-moving equipment, removing the topsoil without damaging the archaeology below.
Andrew, this is a massive area of excavation, but this is only a small part of the whole scheme.
It's a very small bit. This is the biggest dig in Britain this year. It's a road scheme just over 6 miles long, but it's one big archaeological site. Almost every single bit is an archaeological excavation.
And how many archaeologists have you got working here at any one time?
At the moment, there are about 130 archaeologists on site, but working in the offices, backing them up, there are others, so about 150 people.
So you've got this big new road being built, and all the way along the length of it, archaeology has to happen first.
It is. It's one of these bittersweet opportunities that the archaeology will be destroyed, but the sweetness is that we get the opportunity to make a record and to investigate about this part of the archaeology of East Kent.
Turn the clock back 2,000 years, and this part of Kent where the new road is being built would have looked very different. Then the Isle of Thanet really was an island, separated from the mainland until medieval times by a stretch of water called the Wonsum Channel. And it's here that the new road is being built, and more importantly for us, where the excavations are taking place.
The important thing is this is a precious opportunity to record the archaeology here before it disappears forever as the new road comes through.
The rolling deadlines for completing different sections of the new road mean that the team has had to develop a fast method of systematically recording the objects at the time they're excavated. Every find is individually numbered, plotted by GPS and photographed, as well as being accurately drawn by archaeologists in the field. Back at the construction compound nearby, the data is fed into computers and the photos are carefully traced.
I've come a bit further south on the site now to an area rather poetically known as Zone 6, but there's really interesting archaeology here. 2,000 years ago, this would have been the neck of a peninsula sticking out into the Wonsum Channel. And the archaeologists are finding evidence of the very people who would have been living here when the Romans arrived.
And it's here that the team have discovered the foundations of an Iron Age roundhouse.
And this is a typical building of the period before the Romans arrive in Britain.
Yes, for hundreds of years, thousands of years before the Romans arrived, people lived in circular houses with conical thatched roofs. And sometimes there's been one or two in a small farm, or it seems to be the case here, maybe a small village with 7 or 8 or more houses in it. So very typical of the Iron Age.
So you think this was a village then?
We think so, yes. As you can see, we've got many more of those curvilinear ditches, which we think may indicate where the houses were.
This one's a nice complete circle, but we're just catching the edges here, just little arcs, edges of round houses.
We are really lucky with this one. It doesn't happen very often to have such a good preservation.
So it would have been a timber house. None of the timber is there, but we've still got this ditch that went around the periphery.
Yes.
And is there any dating material that's come out of that ditch?
We are quite lucky in this respect as well. We've had some pottery from the outer ditch, and it suggests it's a Belgic pottery, which would put us about 100 years before the Romans arrived.
So it gives you a really precise date.
A really good dating. Yeah, we're really lucky.
Yeah.
A few feet away, the team have just uncovered a cobbled surface littered with animal bones.
They seem to be kind of embedded in the stones as well.
They believe that this was the butchery and food preparation area for the village, whose very inhabitants would have seen Claudius's army arriving in 43 AD.
We've got these 2 parallel marks, which could be from a knife.
So this is the remains of animals that have been butchered on the spot just here?
It looks like it, yeah.
And here, we've got a tiny gold coin that on this side...
This coin reveals that the inhabitants of the village already had European connections before the Romans invaded.
So on the back, you have the horse, so the charioteer, and on the other side, there's just the very faint remains of the head. And we find coins like this, some just a few miles away at Minster, but in France as well. And we think it may well have been made in France and used in Britain.
That beautiful gold coin from the Iron Age village in Kent suggests we already had links with France at the time of the Roman invasion. But I'm now headed west to Dorset, where there's hard evidence of trading with the Romans themselves well before they thought of making us the latest addition to their empire.
For more than 200 years, the Romans had been expanding their empire across the Mediterranean. But in the 1st century BC, they started setting their sights further afield. Britannia to the northwest might have seemed like the end of the world, but it had things which the Romans wanted. And what the Romans wanted, they usually got.
Britain already had a reputation for its mineral wealth, for its gold, silver and tin, but there was something else the Romans wanted from us, and it was this. Grain. There was plenty of it growing in this part of Dorset back then, just as there is today. And in fact, Britain would go on to become the breadbasket of the Roman Empire. For those living in these agricultural areas, well, some of them would become very rich indeed.
Traditionally, it was thought that the Durotrigas, the Iron Age tribe who occupied this part of Dorset, were warlike and resisted the Roman invaders. But archaeologists from Bournemouth University seem to be finding very different evidence at this late Iron Age farmstead.
Well, this survey of the site, which is a magnetic survey, shows us the Iron Age ditched enclosure we call a banjo enclosure. That's because it superficially resembles a banjo with the body and the neck. And some of these necks are very, very long.
Where are we standing in relation to the structures you can see there?
Well, we're standing right at the entrance here, where presumably there would have been possibly a gate.
So we're looking at this ditch just here?
Yeah, that's right. That's this ditch here, and it follows round and then curving round and back down. This is where you would have entered the site and you would have seen one probably substantial roundhouse and a number of subsidiary roundhouses and a lot of activity going on within this large enclosure. These sites are effectively wealthy, well-appointed, undefended.
But there's something else on the site which is really intriguing the Bournemouth team. They found more than 30 cylindrical pits carved into the chalk bedrock by ancient tools and now excavated by the hands of modern-day archaeology students.
Miles, what are these pits?
Well, these are very sort of large cylindrical storage pits. Basically, it's been cut down straight into the chalk, and we're assuming that what they're actually storing is grain of some kind.
Have you found grain in these pits?
Yes, indeed. We've got small pieces of sort of oats and barley which have come out from the lowest levels of these pits.
Iron Age barley. And presumably that's not just for their consumption on the site here?
This, I would imagine, is stuff that's being exported.
Right.
And to some extent we can see the results of that exportation from the artefacts that are coming up in these pits.
So there's artefacts as well?
Yes, indeed. It appears that once the grains come out, they're putting a whole range of artefacts in. We've got these large slabs of Iron Age pottery.
Oh, yeah. So are they using this as a rubbish pit, then?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we're not seeing a random sort of deposit of domestic waste. We seem to be seeing a deliberate selection procedure. We've got fragments of horse and cow and sheep.
It's quite peculiar. It suggests there's something symbolic about placing these objects in there.
Yes, indeed. I mean, it might be that having emptied the pit, you've got to put something back in as a kind of offering, perhaps to ensure the, the long-term fertility of the land, perhaps as an offering to the gods.
Pits that the archaeologists are finding all over this site seem to have a very obvious practical use for storage of grain. But there's definitely something else going on. Objects are being placed in the bottom of these pits that have some kind of symbolic value. And it's not just objects, it's not just animal bones and pottery that the archaeologists are finding.
Of all the deposits I've seen on the site, this has to be the strangest.
It's an adult male who's lying face down on, I suppose, what can best be described as a bed of meat.
How strange.
You've got sort of horse and pig and cow bone all there sort of underneath him.
And it looks as though he's just been thrown into the hole. I mean, it really doesn't look as though he's been placed in there with any ceremony. It's not a formal burial, is it?
Certainly to our modern eyes, it looks like he's been rolled in. As I said, he's lying face down. His legs are slightly tangled up. There's no obvious kind of order or perhaps reverence to that. It's difficult to see whether this is a grave in the conventional sense and that the bone represents food for the afterlife, or whether the adult himself represents just part of the deposit.
How strange. There's something very odd going on with these pits, isn't there?
There is. I mean, it's almost like, I suppose, burying an ancestor, burying an aunt or an uncle in a cupboard in the kitchen. It doesn't make sense to us. You know, this is the area where they're living, they're working, but their dead are going in these kind of disused pits.
It's very peculiar. Whatever the meanings of the bones deposited in the pits here in Dorset, it's clear that the people who farmed this land prospered from trading with the Romans. The Bournemouth University dig is showing that far from the popular image of Roman invaders locked in combat with the local tribes, this settlement at least is suggesting a much calmer transition.
Becoming part of the Roman Britain is no significant shock to these people at all. There's just a great deal of continuity. And I think that's pretty much for the whole of Roman Britain, because we get so awed by the high visibility of villas and temples without realising that these just represent less than 1% of what's going on in the countryside. By far and away, the bulk of the population are living the same lifestyle, doing the same things, completely unaffected.
"30 miles north in Somerset, evidence is emerging that here too, local people may have been keeping hold of their ancient beliefs and ways of honouring the gods." There's nothing around to suggest there's anything particularly special or significant about this Somerset field, but I know for certain that 1700 years ago, somebody or a group of people came here and did something right here on this very spot. In late April this year, metal detectorist Dave Crisp was searching this same field. He was about to make the discovery of a lifetime.
I got this funny signal, and it was an iffy signal, it really was. So I dug down, and I dug a bit deeper, and it was still there, and I dug a bit deeper. I'm 12, 14 inches down now, and I put my hand in, and I pulled out a black thing, and I thought, I've got a rock. No, it looks like a bit of pottery. It looks like a Roman bit of burnish, black burnish ware. That's quite interesting, I thought to myself. So I put my hand in again and pulled out a bit more clay, and there was a little radiant, little bronze Roman coin, very, very small, about the size of my fingernail. Then I realised that the piece of burnish ware I had was the top of a pot, and I thought, I got a hoard. And I went, and I'm in the middle of nowhere saying, I've got a hoard. I've been 22 years detecting, and I've never had a hoard before that weekend.
Dave was convinced he'd found treasure, but instead of digging it up, he contacted the Portable Antiquities Scheme, which records archaeological objects found by the public. Finds liaison officer Anna Booth suspected that this was going to be a job for a professional archaeologist.
We actually had no idea how big the hoard was going to be at this stage, so it was very exciting for us all. We uncovered the neck of the vessel, and what we could see was a small dish in the top of it, which was actually acting as a lid. At first, we wondered whether this was the bottom of quite a small vessel and it was turned upside down, but when we dug a bit further, we realised that it was actually a lid sitting in top of an absolutely enormous vessel of the size that none of us had ever seen anything like it before, so it was absolutely fantastic. And it was only at that stage that we realised that it was actually a huge hoard of coins that we were dealing with.
That must have been quite breathtaking.
It was amazing, it was absolutely fantastic. And then over the following 2 days we actually undertook the excavation. And it did take us the full 2 days, starting first thing in the morning till last thing at night, until the sun went down, just excavating thousands upon thousands of coins and bagging them up. It took a huge amount of time, but it was absolutely fascinating and an amazing process to go through.
Because Dave Crisp got archaeologists involved right from the very start, archaeologists who were able to systematically excavate the pot layer by layer, it's meant we have a much better chance of finding out why that pot full of coins was buried in this field all those years ago. The Frome hoard is looking like it might be the biggest coin hoard ever discovered in Britain. They've estimated that there are around 50,000 coins weighing in at 160 kilos. That's about the weight of 2 adults. But the coins need urgent attention, and that's why in early May they were brought here to central London. The Roman coins arrived at the British Museum, still wet and stuck together with heavy Somerset clay. Pippa Pearce is a metals conservator at the museum. For several weeks now, Pippa has been fully occupied, carrying out the first stage of the coins conservation by carefully washing the contents of the 67 bags which made up the Frome hoard.
So into the fume cupboard for a quick dry.
The coins span 40 years, from AD 253 to 293, and the vast majority are made of debased silver and bronze. Roman coin experts Roger Bland and Sam Moorhead have dropped everything to concentrate on the Somerset coins.
Yet another coin of Tetricus.
That's Claudius. That's the emperor standing holding a branch.
They've been sorting the coins by emperor at a rate of nearly 6,000 a week. It's now 8 weeks since the Frome hoard was raised and all the coins have been cleaned and sorted. But are we any closer to finding out how and why such an enormous hoard was buried in that Somerset field? Roger, this is just a small fraction of the whole hoard. How many coins do you think there are?
Well, we think the final number is going to be just over 52,500 coins.
So how big is this hoard in the context of other hoards that have been found in Britain?
It's the largest ever hoard found in a single pot in this country. There was another hoard found in 1978, which had just a couple of thousand more coins, but that was in 2 pots.
And do you have any idea of the value of these coins?
Maybe about the equivalent of 4 years' pay for a Roman legionary soldier. So if you were to turn that into present-day values, that might be about £100,000 in present-day terms.
So, Sam, this is a piece of the pot, is it?
Yes, this is the piece of the pot that was found in. And when they excavated, the pot was already broken. And you can see it's quite thin. Neither I nor the conservator believe that this would have been able to hold 160 kilograms of metal without breaking.
Yeah, that is very thin.
And so it's almost certain that the pot was actually buried in the ground first, and then the coins were added after it had been put in the ground.
Sam doesn't think that this pot was one person's saving scheme, but more likely part of an ancient ritual.
I don't believe myself that this is a hoard of coins intended for recovery. And I think what you could see is a community of people who are actually making offerings, and they are each pouring in their own contribution to a communal ritual votive offering to the gods or whoever it is.
Just because it's communal, that doesn't necessarily mean it's ritual, though, does it? Because people could be burying something in the ground that they were worried was going to be taken away from them.
If you're going to bury this for security and safety, you put in lots of different pots, so you could easily take them out of the ground later. Also, if you wanted to get these coins out of the ground, you'd have to dig down to the pot, smash the pot, and then shovel them out, which would also be a very lengthy process. So I believe that it was never intended for recovery.
And you're seeing echoes here of a more ancient tradition, pre-Roman?
I think so, yes, absolutely. The same people. We know from other studies that the people of the West Country were the same people as they were in the Bronze and the Iron Ages, so why not continue the same practices?
I am naturally quite a sceptical person, and I tend to look for the most obvious explanation for things. But it really does seem, from talking to the experts, that whoever it was that buried that pot full of coins in the ground wasn't intending to come back to it. In which case, perhaps this is an echo of an ancient tradition that we're seeing. Maybe those coins are a votive offering, and perhaps this was a sacred field. Not all archaeological recoveries happen as fast as the Roman coin hoard. There's one project involving a catastrophic fire and a Roman shipwreck, which has lasted for over 30 years. St Peter Port, Guernsey, in the Channel Islands. Jason Monaghan is museums director here. As a young student in the 1980s, along with diver Richard Keane, he was involved in the biggest archaeology project the island had ever seen.
In the course of my diving in the harbour and the pierheads, picking up pottery and scallops and whatever else I could find, I came across a wooden wreck.
Richard thought it was an old barge used to build the harbour wall, but it would be another year before he realised the significance of what he had found.
There was the wreck, more exposed, and great big chunks of Roman tile. You know, you can't mistake Roman tile. I thought, oh, crumbs. This is going to be really interesting.
Richard had found the remains of a Roman ship, uniquely preserved on the seabed for over 1,600 years. But how did it come to be here?
St Peter Port would have had a wide sandy harbour, and this ship would have been somewhere in the entrance, possibly anchored, possibly moored. It caught fire for whatever reason, we don't know. The fire raged for some time, then the water came on board, quenched the fire, and the ship sank.
What the maritime archaeologists had found were the remains of a Gallo-Roman trading vessel which transported cargoes from as far south as Spain, through the English Channel, and possibly even up into the North Sea. The ship was carrying blocks of pitch, a natural resin, which would accidentally preserve the wreck.
We believe the fire raged in the back of the ship. The back of the ship is the best preserved because the cargo of pitch the ship was carrying melted during the fire. And this spread out to cover an area of about 8 square metres. So when the ship sank, this quenched into a solid mass and effectively held the back end of the ship down.
The Roman timbers have now crossed the Channel to Portsmouth and the Mary Rose Trust, where for the past decade they've been treated and dried.
More exposed, presumably.
Yeah, that was sticking out the seabed at this end here. Yeah.
For Jason too, it's been a long journey.
This was my first job after leaving university, so it's actually very strange after 2.5 decades to be coming back and seeing the timbers in the final state that we talked about so very excitedly all those years ago.
The conservation process has worked beautifully there.
But there's one final problem to overcome. The timbers are wrapped, boxed and ready to go home, but there's nowhere big enough on Guernsey at present to house the reconstructed ship.
This is a very important ship for Guernsey.
Roman archaeologists talk a lot about trade in inverted commas, but actually we have very little evidence apart from inferring that this pottery went from here to there. So here we have a very solid example of how the trade was carried out. Ships like ours sailed from port to port, carrying stuff in their holds.
30 years might seem like a long time for an archaeological project. But back here at Vindolanda, they've been digging for even longer. And during that time, it's here where we've come closest to knowing the Romans who occupied Britain.
You're right.
It is tempting to think that we know everything about the Romans already. After all, they wrote things down, they left us records. But archaeology gives us a different perspective. It helps to fill in details and paint a fuller picture, but it can also challenge our preconceptions, and that's when sites like this get really interesting. So Andrew, what have we got here?
Well, what we've got here is the wonderful...
Until recently, it was believed that temples were never sited inside Roman auxiliary forts. That was until last year.
So this is all part of the temple?
This is all part of the temple. It actually stretches from the gate all the way up to the angle tower. This is all 3 rooms of the quite an impressive building. And what's awesome about this is that we absolutely do not expect to find temples to pagan gods, particularly Eastern cults, inside auxiliary forts. This is the first one that's ever been found anywhere in the Roman Empire.
Really?
We were actually looking for a toilet block under here because we've got barracks behind us. And
so you're looking for latrines and you found a temple?
Looking for a loo, we found a temple. There is some sort of poetry in that, I'm sure.
So these little pillars here, are they supporting a floor? Is this a hypercourse system?
That's right, exactly right, a hypercourse system.
The floor.
You can still see the burning on some of the stones here to show that they had to fire it up in the wintertime at least.
So where would the fire itself have been then?
The little furnace is in this room behind.
And then the hot air comes through there?
Comes through the flue.
And then circulates around here.
And they even know the identity of the god who is being worshipped in this newly discovered temple. Because amongst the ruins, they uncovered this remarkable find, an altar to a god from Turkey called Jupiter Dolicanus.
Here you've got the beautiful iconography of Jupiter Dolicanus riding his bull on this side. He's got his thunderbolts clutched in his hand
and
here.
An axe.
And the axe in the other hand.
So is this altar set up by a military man?
This altar is set up by the big chief himself, the commanding officer of the fort. And if we just read the front of it here, we can see IOM for Jupiter Optimus Maximus.
Jupiter, the biggest and the best.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got to be a little bit beneath Jupiter. And then underneath him, you've got the actual name of the god himself. It's Dolokino, D-O-L-O-C-H-E-N-O. And very, very clear on that line there. And then underneath that, you've got the dedicator, Sulpicius Pudens, his second name. And the very, very bottom line, very common on most inscriptions, VSLM. And that really just means the guy willingly and deservedly fulfilled his vow. And what you're looking at here is the end of a contract. It's a personal contract between Sulpicius Pudens and the god Jupiter Dolicanus.
So he's promised to erect an altar to this god somewhere, and he's now fulfilled his promise.
Exactly.
The sides are so beautifully preserved with the relief carving and the writing, but obviously the top's been exposed. This is all very weathered, isn't it?
It's really well worn, but also it's been very, very badly damaged as well by people coming in when they were demolishing the temple. And the demolition of the temple happened sometime, we think, in the 350s or 70s. And you've got this sort of power struggle with Christianity becoming the official religion. A lot of ancient pagan cults and shrines end up going by the wayside. Poor old Jupiter Dolicanus here eventually fell victim to such a new movement on the northern frontier of Roman Britain.
Christianity had arrived at Vindolanda, but just 50 years later, in 410 AD, the Roman army departed Britain, this time for good. Vindolanda too would slowly be abandoned and would fall into ruin. It's the remoteness of this part of Northumberland which has allowed Vindolanda and its archaeology to survive as a legacy to the Roman occupation of Britain.
In the 400 years the Romans were here, they transformed our country from its language to its landscape, leaving a lasting legacy that remains with us today. And yet, 1600 years later, we're still discovering new things about their society. From that terrible infanticide on the banks of the Thames to that massive coin hoard found just earlier this year in the southwest. There's so much more to understand about the Romans in Britain, and so the digging continues.